Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champions of Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming, presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games, or later on your favorite podcast service, Mitra Jordan and Raffael Boccamazzo, aka Dr. B, talk about mental health and how gaming affects us. I took the line out. I changed it.
You did.
I did. If you hear this live in the chat, you can leave a question that Treavor Bettis, will ask them later in the show. As a heads up, Zoom is being a little weird today, so video might be a little off. I am sorry if it is. I don't know what's going on. It's the magic of Zoom.
It's because I'm broadcasting from vacation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. But our topic today is going to be couples therapy. But before we get to that, who are you two for the fine folks who may not know?
I want to do couples therapy. I'm Mitra Jordan. I work as a therapist in Victoria, BC. I'm in private practice. I love working with couples. Couples are great. And that's all for me. So, geez, this guy here.
Well, hi everybody. Oh boy, my frame rate really is wonky. God, my internet really is awful today, gang. I am so sorry. We have not figured out what's going on with my internet on my end of the world. But I am Dr. B, Raffael Boccamazzo, better known as Dr. B for long Italian name reasons. And I am a clinical psychologist in beautiful Washington State, where I am on my staycation. And I am the clinical director over at TakeThis.org. The very first mental health nonprofit to serve the game community. I'm an expert on applied tabletop RPGs and clinical and learning settings. And I am here with all of you lovely people on Champions of Psychology, mostly to listen today.
Yes.
Because as I mentioned, I am on vacation. I have my beverage, and also I don't do couples therapy. So
we're here to ask questions today because we've got the expert.
Yeah, Mitra,
Ooh.
what's up? The person who does couples therapy.
Yes, I find couples therapy fascinating and fun to do, but where do I start?
Well,
what is couples therapy?
Yeah,
right?
You
have
let's
questions.
start where we always
you have questions.
Yeah,
I have
Mitra.
answers.
Hey, Mitra. Hey.
He's worse than usual on vacation.
What's couples therapy?
What is couples therapy? So couples therapy is when you work with a couple who are in a some form of committed relationship to each other, where there are dynamics at play in their relationship that are interfering with their sense of connection and their communication, and possibly other aspects of their relationship, or they might be facing something that's been really difficult for them. Maybe a death or issues with children. And these are things that bring people into couples therapy, where you work with both the people and where your client is really the dyad or pair of two, as opposed to focusing just on one person.
Wait. Wait, you're saying
Yes.
that you're working with individuals, but you're not working with individuals. How does that work, Mitra? This is quickly turning into an infomercial, isn't it?
It really is. It's a little terrifying. Okay. Yes, you're working with individuals, but you're not working with individuals. You're holding the space for their individual thoughts, feelings, opinions. You want each of them to get to bear witness to the other. And you're also holding the space for the relationship. You know, the whole you, me, us thing.
But you're serving your client isn't the people, it's the dyad, it's the relationship.
Yeah, your client, well, it's both, right? Your client is the people because of their individual experiences that have brought them to this particular place that's led them to come to couples therapy. Okay, I have to really lower this thing because there we go. That's better. Okay, so your client is the couple, but it's also the dynamic and the relational experience that the couple have with each other. Because when you and me get together, we form an us that has a culture, a set of experiences, a history, and a set of dynamics that belong to the relationship. Oh, you may take some of those into your other relationships with other people, of course, but that's still how you interact together and what's happening in those interactions that is also the client, if you will.
This sounds complicated.
Well, that's the thing. Couples therapy is complicated, but it's also really great. It's kind of like, I think of it as detective work in some ways, right? An excavation of what's happening for people. I think of this in terms of individual work as well, where I'm trying to make sense of how a person is doing, what's led them to that point, what in their history is getting pulled into the present moment, all of that. But when you're doing it with a couple, you've got, their individual history, if you will, and the alchemy, cocktail, whatever you want to call it, that happens when both of those experiences and cultures and assumptions come together in terms of what is created between them. Yeah, I'm doing this a lot. Sorry, but that's kind of it. You're holding the space for all of the stuff that's going on with that. Yeah. And
this sounds complicated.
Again,
this sounds
it
incredibly
is.
complicated.
It
Well,
is.
no,
It is.
I mean, in seriousness, this is actually part of the reason that I don't work with couples in a formal couples therapy context. I will work with families. I will work with partners to serve my individual clients. Mm-hmm. But I don't actually do couples therapy. And Mitra's pointing out some of the reasons why not all therapists do it. And I mean, to be frank, not everybody can walk that fine line of serving the dyad without favoring each of the individuals. Like, we have our biases and we have our biases that we need to be aware of as mental health providers. And also, it's just a lot of information to juggle when you're working with a couple.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, which is why couple sessions, at least as I do them, are typically longer. So when I see an individual client, I'll often see them for an hour. Now, maybe if I'm seeing that individual client less frequently, say, we might do, I don't know, once or twice a month, and we might do an hour and a half just to catch up, just to feel that connection and to get some good work done. But when I work with a couple, I'm always doing an hour and a half. An hour is never enough. People start to get anxious about being heard. There's usually more information that can be shared. And in my experience, when I've scheduled an hour, we almost inevitably are going to go over. And that's not good. I want to be able to bring them into the session, have them relax in the session and share what they need to, both get a chance to process what they share, close that back up so that when they leave my office, they can feel safe to kind of do their week or whatever together, and then come back the next time. That's a lot, right?
I actually didn't know that about the time. I know I'm focused on the time thing there, but I actually didn't know that. And I think I just realized that I thought it was just a normal size therapy session of like if I went there on my own. But that makes complete sense. There's more people there. There should be more time.
Right. And not everyone works that way. Some people will do an hour. It just doesn't work for me in terms of being able to get through processing what people are sharing. So it depends on how you work, but I'm a very relationally attachment focused therapist. To my mind, just as when I've talked about working with individual people, we talk about emotionally corrective experiences, right? Where we talk about being able to have a different experience of information that you've shared. So, we can tell a story, for example, about the death of a parent, or moving to a different country, and there's grief and loss in there, right? So part of the healing of those experiences is being able to have a witness to them, and to be able to share information, how you felt it, and to be affirmed for that, to have that information validated, and just someone to explore with you. And it's in that experience that we can do some of the healing work, right? A lot of times in life, if you say to someone, oh yeah, my parent died or something happened that's difficult, their response is, oh, I'm sorry, that must have been hard. And that's great on one level, but on another, I then start to take care of them, right? In therapy, I get taken care of, right? I can sit back and just allow myself to feel my feelings. So when you're working with a couple, yes, there's two sets of feelings, right? There's two sets of experiences. There's two sets of validations, if you will. And it's not just that I validate, it's that you can get people to validate each other in a way that maybe they haven't been able to, right? Because if we get into arguments with our spouse or partner, and it's kind of like, you always, you never, and this always happens, and and we're kind of like this, and it's not, there's no movement in those sorts of arguments. I've told you now 3 times, whatever it is, right? And so we're stuck, right? One person moves into defending, the other person moves into trying to be heard. So when you're in a session, what the therapist gets to do is break some of that down so you can actually hear each other. And there's that emotionally corrective experience we're talking about. But because we're slowing it down and we're trying to hear each other, it's not a speedy process. We just slowed it down, but it also means that I'm now going to have a lot of feelings about what I've really witnessed. And we want time to process that before they go home, so that they can stay in that sense of connection, of friendship, of companionship, rather than moving into feeling defensive again.
Well, so, okay, hold on. So how, all of this sounds a lot like individual therapy, where let's say somebody comes into my office, we chat, which admittedly, you said it slowed down, but how do you figure out what to be working on in couples therapy? Because I suspect by the time people get to your doorstep, there's a lot of bad experiences already in play.
There are, but there's usually themes. There's usually a familiarity to the kinds of experiences. That is to say, many of the experiences are like each other. So for example, if you work with someone where one partner just seems emotionally unavailable to the other, right? And so the other partner who's looking for that connection is experiencing various kinds of betrayals, right? And what I mean by this is things like, when I said I was worried about the kids because of X, you weren't listening to me. And now look where we are, right? So there's been many instances of sharing about a thing where they felt they haven't been heard. Or I went to my folks' place and it's really hard for me and you refuse to come. You've decided you don't want to have anything to do with my parents. What you don't realize is that means you're not supporting me. Mm-hmm. Right. And so they all have the same flavor. Mm-hmm. Go on.
Yeah,
Yes,
I want to raise my hand because I didn't want to cut you off there. The question that I had was like, do you find that there is a difference in, when you're sitting down with one person and talking with them, of finding the things to work on? Do you find that there is a difference between the individual and then the couple, like finding what the points are to work on there?
For sure. So for instance, if I'm working with an individual and they say, I'm a creative person and I've been feeling really dry lately. I've been feeling like, I can't write, I can't paint, I can't whatever, right? So we're going to work on the root causes of that for them, right? And that's the direction, that's the lens. And from that place, we start the work, and we'll probably broaden out to a whole bunch of other things that maybe have affected their creativity, right? When I'm working with a couple, it's the same thing. They come in with a lens. They come in with an idea of what's not working, whether it's their parenting styles are very different and they're really frustrated by that, right? And so that's going to be the beginning point, looking at what happens in that sense of frustration that they're experiencing. Why are they missing each other on this particular topic? Are there particular challenges with one of their children that take them back to their own childhood, right? For example, or is it that they're dealing with something that they just never experienced before? And I'll sometimes deal with this, like somebody's child might have a neurodivergent diagnosis, for example. And you've got two parents who see themselves as neurotypical. They may or may not be, as we know, but they don't know what to do about this. And that's creating a lot of conflict for them in terms of, well, I think we should be more firm and not be so, permissive with them. I think we should do this. I think we should do that. I don't want to go see therapists or whatever. I'm a perfectly fine parent. You can see how this brings up a whole host of issues, not just around parenting, but even around attachment. How do we attach with our kids? How do we support them? How were we attached as children? How weren't we, right? So there's a lens, and then it gets like this. And you kind of have to decide, okay, where do I start? Where do they want to start? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, okay. So kind of, hey, Mitra, hey.
Just going to take a sip here.
I really wish I could. I'm really tempted to title the podcast episode, Hey, Mitra.
I mean, I'm going to go full, if my hair was shorter, I'd go full Harry Carey on here. Hey, Mitra, if you were a moon and you were starving to death.
Oh, God.
No, but like, okay, so we've heard, what is couples therapy actually good for? I mean, we can turn this into sort of the sort of faux infomercial that it is. It slices, it dices, it removes pesky stains in 5 applications or less. But like, for realsies, what is couples therapy actually good for?
Okay. So why go to a couples therapist as opposed to what? As opposed to do nothing, as opposed to bowling?
Yeah, why go to a couples therapist instead of joining a bowling league?
Or we just need more date nights. We don't need therapy, right?
That's God, I've actually, I've heard that one.
I've literally heard that one from
with some of my individual clients.
I don't even have clients, and I've heard that one.
Yeah. So why go to couples therapy? Okay, so couples therapy, depending on where you're at in your life, can help set you on the right path together, if you will. I mean, there isn't any one right path, but a righter path is when you're connected and you're communicating well. And you can also look at how your family history might intervene negatively with that or set you up for not success. For example, a lot of people don't realize the templates they carry around about what married-like relationships mean. And, this has nothing to do with gender or sexuality, but regardless of who, you're watching your parents, your mothers or your fathers, and they have certain
We're
roles.
Watching our parents?
As children, we're watching our parents. We're watching our parents or caregivers, grandparents, whoever's around us, to determine how to do that. How to be who they are, right? So we make sense of how to be in our relationship by watching the relationships around us. This is all well and good if they're really functional, healthy relationships, right? It may be a problem if they weren't.
Wait. Well, so what you're saying, Mitra, is that if, as we grow up, we have poor examples of romantic and familial relationships, we might learn some bad lessons?
I mean, yeah.
Wow.
This is Dr. B's learning vacation.
This is
love it. I'm also loving the
I
background.
leave all of my degrees at home, and when I go on vacation.
But he will be walking on water in a second if you keep
I'm actually eventually I'm going for the Timothy Olmanson hair. I'll grow out my beard and just really look like Lassie from
lad, but it's piratical.
I be a pirate. I be a pirate of psychology.
That's our spin-off show.
Yes, Pirates of Psychology.
Okay, so
we'll be doing it next season.
This is I will say that one of the like for me, I've been very public about my autism. I've talked about my autism, and the reality for me is that couples therapy is almost an inevitability for me. Not for everybody on the spectrum, but for me, because one, my parents didn't have the healthiest dynamic as a child when I was a child, and also I do relationships different because I'm on a different operating system, but I was taught to date neurotypical. And so for me, couples therapy has been a just truly invaluable thing, because it's helped essentially overcome some of the things that Mitra's talked about, expectations of what a quote good relationship looks like. And there's a lot of stuff I realized that I had to unlearn, and that my partner has had to adjust their expectations as well, because a lot, basically, like the language I speak interpersonally between us is different than what they've come to expect. And couples therapy has been absolutely invaluable for me in learning some strategies around that sort of thing between the two of us, and basically keeping it healthy.
Absolutely. And it's that piece around expectations and reality and how change works. They're so important. They're big because as I said, we come in with these templates, these ideas, and these ideas are based on two things. They're based on our life experience, what happened, and they're also based on what we imagine and hope for, what we want to have happen, right? And so then you get together with another person and they have their own, what happened, what I want to have happen, what was done, maybe what I didn't like. And it's entirely possible too, particularly when it comes to parenting, that we think what happened maybe was okay, you know? So some people come in going, well, my dad, mom did whatever, parents did this, that, and the other, and it was just fine, right? Or the reverse, right? Which is that I don't want to do anything how it happened for me, right? And I've talked to, I've had clients who were, for instance, in the foster care system, right? Or other people where there was upheaval and maybe there were many parent type figures or guardians, involved in their life. And so they've had lots to draw from and they haven't liked any of it, or there's only been one shining example or whatever, right? So we have these many variations in terms of expectation, hope that are coming into the room. And then we have the generational milieu, and we have the cultural milieu, and we have all of the other pieces around my careers or how I handle death or my hopes and dreams, right? So then they all come into the room with these folks. So how we want our partners to change is probably not going to be how our partner will change. But we can, if there's a will on both sides, improve how they communicate about their life experience, how they see the world, and how they receive your life experience and how you see the world. And so between those two things, we can kind of make things work a little better in terms of communication and connection. So something that I often work on with individual clients, but it becomes particularly important with couples, is family history and kind of a casual version, if you will, of the adult attachment interview. So this comes out of attachment theory work that was begun by Bowlby and Ainsworth a long time ago and has evolved with many therapists since then and many educators and researchers, where it talks about how did we attach in our families as children? And how do we have an expectation then as adults to attach to others, with others? So you guys look very serious all of a sudden. Very serious taking this in.
Well, there's a lot to consider here. One of the
Yeah.
questions I have as I'm thinking about this is, what's the threshold for you? And this was just brought up in chat by Reaver. Where does therapy for an individual turn into couples therapy? Like, where would you recommend somebody going into working on couples therapy as opposed to just individual stuff? Or do you do them all in tandem?
Sometimes it's a good idea to do them in tandem, which is to say, I've had people who've been in individual therapy where their individual therapist has suggested that they and their partner come to couples therapy. So there's a referral in there someplace. Or the converse, I'll be working with a couple and I'll notice some of the individual pieces that are coming in and really intruding on the couple's connection, but they very much come from, say, someone's history or an experience that they're dealing with, that it's not appropriate to project that onto their partner. It's something that they need to work on individually. So we talk about that. And that's, in general, that's one of the utilities of going to therapy, so that you can actually kind of, you come in and there's like a whole ball of experiences, tangled yarn, if you will, right? And there's this process of untangling and making sense of. And so in the context of working with a therapist, you can kind of make sense of, where is it about the us? Where is it about the relational dynamic? And where is it about my individual relational dynamic and expectations that then comes out in all kinds of relationships, right? It might come out with friends. If I have issues trusting people, for example, that's going to come out in a bunch of different places, for instance. So a skilled therapist will help you navigate that.
Please, sorry, Trevor.
I was like to say, let's actually take a quick break to remind our viewers and listeners of our disclaimer, and then we'll come back with a little more about couples therapy. And remember, you can put your questions in the chat, and our awesome mods, Mars and Martin, will grab them and put them into a doc that we can ask at the end of the show. But we will be right back.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
All right, Dr. B, what were you going to say there?
Well, I'm going to say, Mitra, if this is all the things that couples therapy does, what doesn't it do?
Yeah, there's a lot it doesn't do. I cannot fix a marriage or save a relationship.
Wait, what?
Yeah, can't do that.
We had a plot twist
Listen,
in the middle of the episode.
Mitra, we need to talk before this. And no, but wait, it's that this is something I hear from individual clients, that they are considering couples therapy really when things are seemingly insurmountable, that they don't know what else to do, and they're just like, things are really bad, it's do or die time for the relationship, metaphorically speaking, and they're like, couples therapy, that doesn't just fix the situation.
No, but it does help you make sense of the situation. Like, I can help people provide data into their relational experience. What they decide to do is up to them. I cannot determine for a couple whether their relationship is going to work or not. I can at times hold hope for the relationship. I can at times point out what I think are strengths in the relationship if I'm asked to. And I often will, I'll talk about the dynamic and the themes that have come up and where I think that they have managed to cope admirably, say, in really tough situations, and where I feel like, the relationship could use some work, right? But it's also for them to determine that, right? So as we talk, they start to figure out what's going on and how they're feeling, and they start to experience their partner differently, maybe when they're at home. And some of that different might be good, and some of that different might be, yeah, it's just really not going to work. And that's okay, right? I'm not in the business of fixing so much as I'm helping people figure out what they're looking at, so they can, because it can be overwhelming, right? So if we can kind of parse it out and break it down and look at the themes and the dynamics and all this, they can decide whether they're up for that work, whether the work will take them where they want to go, or, and if it's not going to work, I can help them work out, how are we going to work out dissolving? How are we, if we have children, work out how to tell them or what to do next or any of that? So
well, that you're bringing up a really interesting point, and this was something, like, all joking aside, this is something I remember from my first year of grad school, is our professor, who was really the guru of couples and family therapy when it came to our school, talking about that sometimes, because you're serving the dyad itself and not the individuals, sometimes the best thing to serve the dyad is to not keep people together.
Yeah.
Again, more self-disclosure, there's no amount of couples therapy in the world that could have made my ex-wife and I compatible. I mean, we tried, but just fundamentally, there were so many mismatches that there was no couples therapist who was going to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying is sometimes the best way to do that is to guide people through the process of amicably parting ways.
Right. And
if
guide,
possible.
yeah, and guide is something you do very carefully, which is, so it's not my opinion, but if that's what they decide, then I'll help them with that. And if they're asking, then I will share what I feel their strengths are as a couple and what I feel are some of their challenges as a couple, right? And they can decide what they want to do from that. But it's one opinion very carefully shared with multiple opinions, and the people who matter most are the couple. Because I have seen people manage some some things that for another couple might be insurmountable. I've seen people, for instance, cope with infidelity and move through it. That is a really tough one. For many people, it's an absolute deal breaker. Now, when there's multiple infidelity, like, good luck, folks, come on, that's really hard. And now, if we have different agreements in terms of, is the relationship open or not, that's not infidelity.
Right. But
so
when you're talking about
different.
infidelity, you're
I'm
talking about
talking
essentially
about,
betrayal.
yeah, right. I'm talking about, there was an agreement to be monogamous or whatever. There were some boundaries, right?
Mhm.
And somebody went and transgressed them. And these are harder things to overcome. So it's not impossible, and it depends on the reason for the transgressions, and it depends on the connection between the couple, and it's complex. But there are some things that are just harder to overcome. If you fall out of your love with your partner for the kind of parent that they are, or to be more clear, the parent they're not, that's also a really difficult one. Now, it's complex again. It depends on what's going on. What was their own issues with their parent? Are we enacting some kind of trauma? What's going on, right? But it's also a tough one to get over. So, yeah.
Well, and so another thing is, like, if somebody comes into you to your office, and obviously there are cases in situations like abuse where it really is the responsibility of one person doing a lot of harm. I'm guessing more commonly it's a dynamic issue between both parties. And please correct me if I'm wrong. This is really not my area of expertise.
I mean, some kinds of abuse, you have to find a way to report, because I have a duty to
Right.
report. It's right there in the document of consent that they sign. Um, there are some situations where it's really tricky.
Mhm.
Because when women leave an abusive relationship, they're 7 times more likely to be killed. In other words, in serious abuse cases, they are 7-fold in more danger after they leave. And this is why transition houses are so careful not to let out locations and all of this, because these women need to be safe. And I say women because a lot of times that's who's really at risk. It's not all the time. Sometimes there are cases where, maybe the other partner, maybe male partners, are at risk from each other as well, because abuse is not limited to heterosexual relationships by any means. So, however, so in those cases, if someone comes and sees me and that's what I'm worried about, I have to move, and I also have to move carefully. I have to find a way to get some support to the partner who needs the safety plan. So, yeah. And those relationships, when there's serious abuse, physical, emotional abuse, they may not be. It may be that they just can't and continue, and it may be that they absolutely shouldn't continue.
Well, and again, not my area of expertise, but my understanding is that couples therapy in cases of abuse is in fact contraindicated, because
Absolutely.
because there's too much of a power dynamic going on there.
Absolutely.
And in order for couples therapy to be effective, both partners have to feel safe,
Yes.
and
It
there has to
absolutely
be
doesn't work.
equal footing.
Absolutely. So yeah, when something like that walks in my door, where it's contraindicated that there be couples therapy, but I want to figure out how to keep parties safe, we don't make these decisions alone.
Mhm.
One of the best things about this work is, even when you're in private practice, you can seek supervision, you can have a conversation with colleagues, you can bring more eyes on the situation. You can find ways to support people where you're not making the decision alone as well as the therapist, and where you're helping bring a team of support around the individual who really needs it. So
well,
yeah.
we're getting towards the end of our episode here. Mitra, is there any other things you want to touch on before we pass it over to chat to see what they've been up to?
Well, one thing that I would really urge people is, if it crosses your mind that couples therapy would be useful for your relationship, schedule an appointment. Because even if you find things are just fine, isn't that great news? When is it ever a bad time to explore your relationship? If you're with someone and you want that deeper connection, get some support for it. Because even if you think, oh, I've only been married 3 years, this thing is coming up, or I've only been in a committed relationship, that's fine. Get the support, get another set of eyes if you feel like it would be helpful. The number one problem that occurs so frequently in couples therapy is too little, too late. I'm leaving you. No, let's try therapy first. I've been trying to say this thing for years. You never listen. I'm ready now. Let's go to therapy. Too much damage might have been done.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest. I'm at a loss for a transition to that, so I'm just going to talk through that. But honestly, thank you for taking the lead on all of that. That was a fantastic. 40 minutes of hearing about this, and I know personally I learned a lot there. I do think that to changing over to things, I will say a comment that was put in the chat earlier when it was brought up about the infomercial style. This is from some dude chillin'. Look how this copy
some
of
dude chilling right over here.
look how this copy of the DSM smashes through your intimacy issues, yet remains sharp enough to slice through your ripe tomatoes.
Oh God. I
Do
love
you
it.
think we could do this with the DSM-5? Now featuring the DSM-5 TR.
So Monkey House has our first question. How frequently do couples initiate couples therapy outside of the context of relationship troubles? I feel culture has shaped the perception of quote couples therapy as a last resort so strongly. I'm curious.
Well, I would have said it definitely was considered a last resort. Often people will come to individual therapy first and complain about their spouse, for example. I will say, though, it's been really interesting in the wake of COVID because couples therapists have never been busier. And it can actually be a little bit tough to find a couples therapist these days. And so when I say make an appointment, yeah, you know what, do it, because you might be seeing them 3 months from now. So, hey, yeah, it's really gotten a lot busier out there. And I think, of course, it's because people have spent so much time together, more time than usual. And the other piece is we often use other resources in order to manage our relationships, right? So you've got, working out at a gym with your friends, you've got going out to get-togethers, you've got going out to restaurants. These may be things that really worked for couples, or some of the hobbies that they shared together that helped them feel connected had to now go by the wayside, and it made it much more difficult for people, and they much more the challenges in the dynamic would have been much more apparent to them. So
makes sense. I know there were jokes for a while during lockdown. I was just like, oh, this is the real test of the relationship. So it makes sense.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody I know said the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, I know we love each other, but do we love each other only each other for one full year in lockdown during a global trauma?
Yeah.
I mean, it is really trying on every relationship. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, right? A part of a healthy relationship is to acknowledge the ways in which you can drive each other around the bend so that you can be gentle about them. So you can joke about them. Like, we used to have a whole loading the dishwasher issue that routinely came up in my marriage. And I know a lot of people who have that dishwasher discussion.
Oh my, it's that's your book, by the way, Mitra. It's not actually the dishwasher.
Oh, it's not actually.
It's actually beautiful.
It's not about the dishwasher.
It's not about. Oh gosh. Sponsored by
control. Or control in the kitchen. Those eggs are starting to look mighty overcooked over there. A little passive aggressive. I'm just trying to help.
Oh boy.
Hey Mitra.
Oh God.
God, that wall's looking awfully, I don't know, saffron.
It is very saffron. It is true. It is true. It is super well lit and extremely saffron. I happen to like saffron, also turmeric, all the yellow things, in fact.
Oh, look at this. I'm throwing passive aggressive Mitra's way, and there she is, just like Neo in the Matrix. Wah, 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 wah. Just not even engaging. That was fantastic. No, this is the last couple of years have just been so hard on every couple. And there's actually a term that I was introduced to recently that I think most therapists know this concept, but I never heard this term before, and I need to look more into it. And it's called the arrival fallacy.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Oh,
yeah. And it's basically things will be better when things will be better when. And
totally.
I would imagine with couples, there's this idea that all of our problems will be solved when X happens.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, this brought something up.
Oh, big time. So one of the things that has happened with couples that I've noticed over the years is sometimes the better when has led to more commitment when it shouldn't. Things will be better when we're finally, married or marriage-like commitment.
Right.
Things will be better if we
oh
buy
God,
a house,
that was
have a
actually said
child.
to me in my marriage.
Yeah, and it's such a mistake.
Oh jeez.
Folks, I don't advise on this channel, but I'm going to suggest that if you're considering upping the ante to make things better, stop, sit, see a therapist. Slow it down. Slow it down. This
So
is
this is a
different
red
than the
flag
last.
for you.
Hugely. This is a difference between. This is a difference between the final couple of intense arguments you might have right before you get married, where there's been not really a lot up till then, no breakups, no nothing.
Right.
But now you find yourself having really stupid arguments. That's fine. That's fine.
Right. Weddings are stressful. I mean, like,
But
if
weddings are
anybody's ever
stressful.
if anybody's ever planned a wedding, my same former professor who taught me enough about couples therapy for me to know I don't want to do it. What said the two most stressful events in a family life cycle are marriages and funerals.
Absolutely. And funerals are actually easier in some ways because people are just coming together, to grieve. People have lots of opinions about weddings.
Yup.
Oh God,
and it's complex to hold the space. So my point there is, don't worry about those kinds of tiffs, but do worry if you're thinking things aren't so good, but I should propose. No.
Oh.
Yeah. No, it's okay to wait. There is no rush. So if you're thinking about deepening the commitment, but you feel really rocky about your connection, if you're honest with yourself, take a step back and look at that connection. Try to see what you can do to build on that first.
Mm-hmm.
It's the connection, that sense of attachment, that sense of being intimate and comfortable and excited, but restful in the relationship. A relationship that's good should feel much of the time easy.
Yeah.
Well, isn't there Gottman's ratio?
Oh yeah, remind me.
Is it like, God, I can't believe I'm reminding you of something.
I know.
Wow.
I'm just immediately thinking bank account, and I'm thinking Four Horsemen. So give me
I think there was the very famous ratio that a lot of therapists learn about is based on John Gottman's relationship research, and that's the idea that we have a ratio of at least 5 to 1 positive to negative experiences within the context of a relationship.
That's what you're going with, the sort of positive versus critical. Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, life is going to throw curveballs at your relationship and is going to throw challenges, and that's fine. That's life. That's what life does to all of us. But your internal connected world shouldn't be the challenging part. Mm-hmm. In other words, there will be challenges coming up that are going to shake up the relationship, and you're going to sort of have to figure out how to lean on each other and support each other through things. But if the challenge is your dyad and interaction, that's another layer of stress on top of what life will throw at you. That's very difficult. And I think you all understand what I'm talking about when you think of this in the context of COVID. Mm-hmm. COVID was an external stressor that created challenges to the relationship. Very much is, unfortunately. You're right. But within the context of the relationship, if there were already stressors, it will have made things even worse. So that's where I'm coming from with this.
Oh God. I mean, and how many parents, I mean, this sort of arrival fallacy concept. I mean, how many couples think, well, if we just have a child, that'll make our marriage better?
Really won't. It really won't. What it'll do is it'll bring up two things. It'll bring up two major things: how we parent. It'll bring up possibly issues of religion and spirituality. It's going to bring up how do we discipline a child. It may bring up your own childhood trauma, and it most certainly will bring up how you handle tasks. Yeah. As in how you share the responsibilities of this child. It will also bring up your thoughts and issues around healthcare, your thoughts and issues around education and schooling.
It almost sounds like sharing parenting duties is complex and will not, in fact, fix things, but will, in fact, make things more complicated.
100%. I love having children, but it is the most it's the most difficult transition in the context of a relationship that you will ever have. Okay, no, I shouldn't say that you will ever have, because there might be many other transitions relationally, but it's certainly a predictable one, right? So
I want to get one last one here before we gotta head out.
Nope.
We actually, Mitra, you actually answered the first part of this one, but there was a follow-up question. I'm gonna read the first one just for the context. This was Reaver's question of how often does therapy for an individual turn into couples therapy due to interpersonal social interactions influence a situation. But Grungy Gelfling had a follow-up and says, and to take it a step further, if there are kids involved, does it turn into family therapy?
No, well, that really depends on what the issue is. I have had I've had couples that I've worked with where we've ended up doing some family therapy, and where we've also done a little bit of individual therapy.
Mm.
I sort of became their go-to for a bit, which was quite. I was such an honor, and they were lovely. But it depends on the issue. I mean, children will often experience challenges within their parents' relational context if the parents are unhappily together. And likewise, the parents' unhappiness and maybe disagreement around how to raise children creates a lot of confusion for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can support the parents, then we also can support the kids, which is to say, if we're working on that parent relationship, often things will sort themselves out in terms of how those parents are dealing with children. Not every time, but often.
So there's foundational issues. You don't start from the top down when it comes to this sort of interpersonal dynamic therapy. You start from the bottom up.
Right. And you start from where it's safer. I'm not going to bring a child into family therapy if I don't understand exactly what's happening with those parents.
Yeah.
You know, family therapy issues tend to be around other stuff. For instance, I worked with a family after one of the children suicided. You know, I've worked with families where one person had chosen to absent themselves and they now wanted to come back and do a little bit of work with that family. So they cut off from their family and now they're the ones asking for therapy as part of as part of being able to kind of work through some of the dynamic issues that cause that separation.
Wow.
You know? Yeah. So there's some pretty serious reasons why family therapy might come about. It is the least frequent kind of therapy I have practiced, and I am a family therapist. I'm perfectly happy to do family therapy, but that it's really just a handful of times in terms of, if I compare it to the number of couples I see, which are fully there, I would say they're half my practice, if not more, would be couples right now. So I work with a lot of couples.
Before we go, actually, Mitra, can I ask you, I think I was alluding to this question earlier. Where do you, but I'm not sure if I asked it so directly, where do you differentiate the need between couples therapy versus individual therapy while simultaneously working with their partner? Because that's something I will do.
So let me see, you would do a couple session, but also you would be working on your own individual sessions with a different
no.
therapist?
Like if I'm working with one of my individual clients, there are times where their partner needs to be involved in the individual session. How do you differentiate as a couples therapist the need between individual therapy with support versus couples therapy?
Oh, well, first of all, it's really got a lot to do with boundaries, and then it's got to do with the issue. So I've certainly had clients where they've just been going through a lot in terms of trauma work, and you know, maybe some in the past, some enacting of some of that trauma experience or some of the trauma narrative has entered the relationship, right? But they're usually, it's if that person wants to bring their partner in, we're very clear that it's about the partners there in order to figure out how to support, and also sometimes in order to figure out how to cope with my clients, the singular clients, dysregulation, right? Because sometimes things will happen where we just go into fight, flight, freeze. Sometimes people have come in because there's been issues around their physical, their sexual intimacy in relationally. Maybe there is a history of trauma in there, and they just like their partner to understand how to proceed, how to cope with triggers, perhaps how not to take it personally if something comes up. So we're very clear on the kind of work we're doing at that point, which is we're not so much dealing with the partner's health because they're not the client, but we are dealing with the client and to some degree the dyad. So, yeah.
Okay. We got to start wrapping up. But again, Mitra, thank you so much for this episode. I mean, we when we had this one on the docket, we knew this was going to be the Mitra episode, and knocked it out of the park. So thank you. Friends, where can people find you on the interwebs if they would like to do so?
So for me, they can find me at Mitra Jordan and at mitrajordan.com. I'm not everywhere like some of our friends with the mountainous backgrounds. I'm looking at you. But I am certainly available to people and I'm around. So
I'm definitely around. But no, y'all can find me on the interwebs at the Dr. B. That's THEE. D is DOCTORB as in boy. But it's more important that you follow Take This Org on all of the socials. And oh, by the way, we just launched the first in our upcoming video series, free mental health education resources for content creators. And this one was in partnership with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention on how to respond to talk of self-harm in your chat. Make sure to go check out Take This Org. Follow us to keep up to date on that one, because the next is a 3-part series on burnout as a content creatir. I'll be filming that next week.
That is so great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, you can follow me on Twitter at the Treavor. There's an A high in there, but go do that stuff first. You can also find me anywhere the Isle Champions community is, because I'm the community manager, and that's where I'll be. Thank you to Martin and Mars for moderating the chat today and doing a fantastic job. Thank you to Codename Entertainment and Take This for giving us an opportunity to have these discussions. If you missed any part of the show, you can catch it later on your favorite podcast service. And if you have any suggestions for future topics you'd like us to talk about, you can send those into championspsychology at codenameentertainment.com. Or if that's too long, just tweet them at us. Let's see. We've got a rebroadcast of Bardic Inspiration coming up after this. Bushwhacker Weekly later in the day. And I believe for the most part, the rest of our streaming schedule is about normal. So enjoy those whenever you can. But thank you for joining us this week. And until next week, take care of yourself.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.